Hey guys, we're bringing you a bonus episode this Friday morning. We are giving you a sneak peek into the Modern Acre Co-op. So we recently started doing weekly episodes over on our Modern Acre private podcast feed where we do exclusive audio content. And Tim and I, every week, we sit down, 10 minutes, we talk about what's interesting to us this week. What have we read? What have we consumed? What are we just thinking about? We each make a pick, and then we talk about the news of the week. So we wanted to share maybe once a month or so to the public feed, just a little bit behind the curtain of what we're doing with the Modern Acre Co-op 10. So check that out. If you're listening, guys, the Modern Acre, we're the podcast for builders in agriculture who think differently. So if that's you, the co-op's a great opportunity to be along like-minded builders in agriculture. Hope you guys enjoy this episode. We are sponsored by American Ag Credit. If you haven't checked them out already, hit the link in the show notes, and hope you guys enjoy this sneak peek.
Hey guys, welcome back to this week's edition of the Co-op 10. Ty, I promised not to monopolize the time. I was getting my list ready, as I do before the Co-op 10. I had three things on the list, so I have kind of a top, a backup, and a safety. So I kind of triaged it on where I want to go with it. There's a lot of big news this week. I'm hope we don't have the same pick. I think we might, but I'll let you start, Ty. What's your pick of the week?
All right. My pick of the week is I listened to a Andrew Huberman podcast this week. It was from a few weeks ago with Dr. Lane Norton. Did you listen to that one, Tim?
I did get that one, Ty.
You did?
I did, yeah. It was a good one.
Oh, man. I haven't listened to one in a long time. And I was like, I'll listen to this one. It's like a 3-hour podcast. So that's crazy that you listened to it too. Okay, well, that's my pick. And I have some takeaways, Tim. I think that we talked with Carter last week around just food is health. And I think I'm thinking a lot more about just the convergence of people caring about their health and their fitness and their longevity with agriculture and the food system and sustainable regenerative practices. I think there's something very interesting there. And as guys like Huberman, Peter Attia, and others are just talking about this space more, getting guys like us more interested in what we're doing with our bodies and how we're being more fit, I think there's a lot of interesting takeaways. So the podcast is worth a listen. It's 3 hours long, so, buckle up. But a few key takeaways. One, Tim, was how they both interpret data analysis in the industry, right? Like with fitness, health, there's always these peer-reviewed studies, human-controlled trials, all of these things that basically determine, hey, should we take this supplement or this supplement? Or how should intermittent fasting be a component and does that help? And all these things of does these things that we assume, do they actually work? And what is the outcome of those things? And there's this concept around meta-analysis. And meta-analysis in the industry is basically when you actually just pool a number of different analyses and draw conclusions from multiple studies. So it's taking multiple and taking the landscape and then maybe trying to draw a conclusion across those multiple studies. And I just think that was really interesting to hear them talk about. I think I totally agree with that approach. There's a lot of studies where you can't have a perfectly human controlled trial where you control for the eating of humans for 2 years to come to a conclusion. These are very hard studies to execute. And I think having a comprehensive approach to I'm going to take this anecdote, I'm going to take this data study, I'm going to take these other peripheral information that I have to form a conclusion, I think makes a lot of sense. And I think, where is this for agriculture, right? When we talk about regenerative practices and what works, I think that it'd be helpful to understand a meta-analysis for cover crops, a meta-analysis for biologicals or a certain component of biologicals. I think there's all these one-off, one company's doing their own data trials. It's maybe not a perfect study because they're incentivized to have a good outcome for them and their product, right? So how can you have this higher level view of someone like a Huberman or a scientist that can evaluate and do a meta-analysis on a particular practice or product or something? So that was takeaway one. Takeaway two was they talked about sugar and seed oil, Tim. And, sugar has become the boogeyman. Seed oils have become the boogeyman, right? There's this huge push within the fitness wellness community. Seed oils are evil. I think I buy a lot of a lot of it, but I don't really know. And I like olive oil, right? And they say that's good. And I like grass-fed butter. So, that I do that because it's not really, it doesn't cost me a lot. Yeah, it's a little bit more expensive, but I prefer the taste, right? But there's been this whole kind of demonization of seed oils and sugar. And Lane was just making the point of probably the most important thing is just caloric intake. And from a losing weight, it's really the macronutrients are important. But ultimately, if you're getting the right macronutrients and the right amount of calories to be at a caloric deficit, you'll lose weight. And he cited there was this famous study of this professor that went on a Twinkie diet where he just ate Twinkies and I think food from 7-Eleven, but he was at a caloric deficit and he lost weight. Right. So there's just kind of this interesting dynamic of people just wanting to demonize a particular product. And I think that's really interesting for the food industry and for agriculture, right? Because that's driving often demand for sugar and for some of these seed oil products that are reduced in demand because of people's belief around a particular product. So I just found those conversations fascinating. Again, I'm not really going to go buy seed oil from the store today or load up on soda. wasn't my takeaway, but I just thought it was really interesting. So those were two takeaways that I think could be interesting for its impact to agriculture.
Good pick, Ty. I think, there's a lot of overlap with the Callie and Casey Means podcast going on Tucker, where it's just becoming such a mainstream conversation now. All these top podcasts are talking about the food health connection. So I think there's definitely a lot of tailwinds to this area, but it's a tricky space where there's a lot of different data and you can manipulate that to basically get your narrative and point across. So that's a good pick, Ty.
All right, Tim, what do you got for us this week?
So this week, Ty, I thought you were going to pick this one. Paul Graham put out his latest essay. I know you're a Paul Graham fanboy, so wanted to talk about his latest essay about founder mode. Did you read this, Ty?
No, I'm not on Twitter, Tim. So it's much harder for me to get the picks, too, because I'm not on Twitter.
Okay, so this is hot off the press, Ty. It's basically describing what Paul Graham calls founder mode. So there's two types of management modes. One is founder mode. One is manager mode. Manager mode is well known in business school. That's kind of the typical, you treat the org chart as the backbone of the organization. You avoid micromanaging. It's described as putting good people and giving them room to do their job. So that's kind of the classical approach to management. So founder mode's a little bit different. It kind of breaks the traditional, you only engage with your direct report, where CEOs are engaging with people across the organization and they have skip level meetings where it's it might not be your direct report, but you could just go to the bottom of the organization, ask questions, and kind of have these what's described as skip level meetings. It allows for more direct involvement with the organization. He used the example of Steve Jobs at Apple would have a meeting for the 100 most important people at Apple. And those necessarily weren't the top 100 best managers. It was who's actually doing the work to drive Apple forward. And so that really shows you who's most important to a company. And it's not just the title. So just kind of an interesting conversation. I think he was having the conversation with Brian Chesky, the CEO of Airbnb, talking about kind of what makes organizations really successful and kind of having this active CEO that's not kind of sitting in the ivory tower, relying on middle managers to go execute the game plan, but one that's really actively involved in the business.
Great pick, Tim. I love that. I think there was actually a recent My First Million podcast a few months back where Sean talks about going beast mode as a founder, and very similar sentiment, right? And he brought up Peter Thiel, about how Peter Thiel was each employee in the company, you have your one thing, and I should be able to come to you at any time and understand what is your one thing? What is your one priority? How are you meeting that priority? So that kind of reminded me of that. But I think super important, especially you talk about the whole peacetime versus wartime CEOs, right? We're kind of in wartime territory, right? Where there needs to be, I think, more energy from the top, right? Versus just passive management.
Totally. If you're not on Twitter, the other funny takeaway from this whole founder mode conversation this week is just the discourse on Twitter of just everybody has their take of here's the TLDR on founder mode. There was merch stores popping up where there's founder mode hats of just there's a whole marketplace and economy just based off a Paul Graham essay, which is pretty fascinating.
Okay, that makes me want to be on Twitter a little bit, but I think I'm out. I think I might be out long term. We'll see. I don't hold me to that.
That's manager mode thinking, Ty.
What? Okay, let's wrap things up, Tim, with the news of the week. This is from, I think, 2 weeks ago, Tim, but I think worth digging into a little bit. The partnership with FBN and ADM. They launched a new company to connect grain buyers with more regeneratively grown goods. So they launched a new company. It's not a new company. It's Farmers Business Network's existing platform called Gradable. So they're basically spinning that off into a new joint venture that is owned 50-50 between FBN and ADM. What the Gradable platform is, it connects grain buyers with farmers using regenerative practices in order to meet growing demand for sustainably produced food items. I think really, Tim, this is like a big piece of carbon reporting, right? ADM needs a way to meet their sustainability goals they've put out there. The Gradable platform allows them to track that with all of the growers using regenerative practices so they can actually quantify the carbon benefit of it, right? So I think that's the idea behind the Gradable platform. But I think it's a pretty big news. I don't think we have any details publicly, Tim, about like the size of this deal. FBN struggling to continue to get to profitability and maintain its massive valuation. ADM has been relying on FBN's technology via Gradable has been a big part of their business on that side of the house, and so it's an opportunity for, hey, let's come together. ADM is going to invest capital into the deal that FBN needs. FBN provides this technology platform to be able to continue to expand it and have ADM have further benefit from it. So I think makes sense, but a very interesting deal.
Super interesting deal. Like, I still haven't quite figured out FBN Tie. It just seems like they're in a lot of different areas that seem like a little bit like contradictory or conflicting. Like if you go to FBN's website, like front and center, they're like promoting kind of fall burn down herbicide sprays. There's generic glyphosate, which are kind of like traditional inputs. And then they have this deal that's kind of on the regen side, like playing into that. And it just seems like two different methodologies, like from the same company. So it's a little bit peculiar to me of like how different all their business units are.
And then they're like playing in AI with Norm, right? And it's like we don't know how much they're investing in that or not, right? Of like, it could be, 1% of their R&D budget. But in any case, yeah, it does seem like they are trying to figure out, hey, where is our product market fit? Like, what is the best place to play? And I think maybe this deal gives them a lifeline, right? To continue to build out Gradable in partnership with ADM and then hopefully hone in on where they want to play, because I think they've really turned into an online retailer, right? I mean, they've become a retailer of which they I think originally wanted to completely disrupt. And so I think it is definitely a challenging time and business model right now.
Well, Ty, we're already over time. The Co-op 10 is just getting pushed out every week. I think we go a minute longer, so we might have to rethink the naming convention if these keep going longer.
I'm sure you would love that if it went longer.
Co-op 15?